Have you ever noticed how some relationships don't collapse suddenly? They fade like a quiet crack in glass? No shouting, no dramatic moment, just a strange emotional distance that appears one day and then never fully disappears. People usually think relationships end when someone finally crosses a line. But after listening to many real stories from couples who broke apart, I realized something unsettling. The ending isn't the beginning of the problem. It's the final chapter of a story that started months earlier inside someone's thoughts. And the most interesting part? The details always change. Different couples, different situations, different personalities. Yet the mental process before the breakup feels almost identical, not the event itself. The explanation people give themselves before it happens, long before anyone walks away. The mind slowly prepares permission. Most people imagine betrayal or emotional drifting as a sudden mistake, a moment of weakness, a bad decision that appeared out of nowhere. But the truth is far quieter. Nothing important in human behavior appears out of nowhere. The mind rehearses actions before the body performs them, first privately, then emotionally, and only at the very end, physically. Here is where the shift usually begins. Instead of thinking, I'm unhappy and I should fix this, the mind starts telling a softer story. Maybe this relationship was never right for me. That sentence feels harmless, almost logical. But psychologically, it's powerful. Because once the brain reframes a commitment as a mistake rather than a promise, loyalty stops feeling like responsibility and starts feeling like restriction. People rarely wake up planning to hurt someone they once cared about. What they do instead is rewrite meaning. The past slowly changes in their memory. Good moments feel smaller. Bad moments feel bigger. Neutral moments feel empty. It's not deliberate lying the brain at its reality to protect comfort. When your feelings change, your memories quietly adjust to support the new emotion. You might hear phrases like, "We've been growing apart for a long time, yet last month everything seemed normal," or "I don't feel understood anymore," even though nothing specific changed. This is not manipulation in the dramatic sense. It's psychological alignment. The mind dislikes contradiction. If a person begins wanting a different life, the brain gradually builds a narrative where leaving feels reasonable rather than painful. The action hasn't happened yet, but emotionally, it has already been approved. Then comes emotional relocation. Attention shifts first, behavior later. A person becomes mentally invested elsewhere before they ever physically leave. They think about conversations differently. They compare reactions. They imagine alternative futures. Not necessarily with another person, sometimes just with another version of themselves. The key detail is this: the present relationship stops feeling like home and starts feeling like obligation. Once that internal shift happens, small changes appear. Conversations feel shorter. Patience decreases. Irritations grow faster. The partner hasn't necessarily changed, but the interpretation has. When attachment weakens, perception hardens. After that, distance needs justification. The mind begins collecting evidence. Tiny annoyances become meaningful patterns. Ordinary flaws become proof of incompatibility. The brain isn't searching for truth. It's searching for emotional consistency. If someone feels detached, they unconsciously build a case explaining why detachment is correct. This stage is important because, from the outside, it looks like criticism, but internally, it feels like clarity. They believe they're finally seeing reality. In truth, they're constructing a reality that matches how they already feel. And here's the part most people misunderstand. The alternative doesn't have to be another person. Sometimes it's just the idea of a different life, more freedom, more excitement, more emotional intensity. The comparison alone weakens commitment. When imagination becomes more emotionally rewarding than presence, loyalty quietly erodes. By the time an actual decision happens, the person isn't choosing between two options anymore. They already chose emotionally weeks ago. The final action simply aligns the outside world with the inside world. This explains why breakups often sound strangely calm from the person initiating them. They're not reacting to a sudden event. They're announcing a conclusion they've lived with privately, for a long time. For them, it feels overdue. For the other person, it feels sudden. Two different timelines, same relationship. Now let's talk about language. Because words reveal the mind's preparation. Notice how explanations rarely focus on decisions. They focus on feelings. I just don't feel the same. Something changed inside me. I need to be honest with myself. These sentences shift responsibility from choice to emotion. Feelings become presented as forces rather than experiences. And if something feels inevitable, resisting it feels dishonest. The brain prefers stories where we remain the good character. So instead of, I chose to leave, the narrative becomes, life pulled me elsewhere. It's comforting and often sincerely believed. Not because someone wants to deceive another person, but because the mind protects identity first. Another quiet sign appears before the ending. Emotional independence increases faster than communication decreases. The person stops sharing thoughts they used to share, not out of secrecy, but because internally they've started living separately. The relationship still exists socially, but psychologically it's already dissolving. From here, the outcome becomes predictable. The final conversation usually sounds reflective, almost philosophical, not angry, not chaotic, just certain. And certainty doesn't come from a single moment. It comes from repetition of the same private thought until it feels like truth. So when people ask, when did it start going wrong? The honest answer is uncomfortable. It started the first time someone emotionally stepped outside the relationship in their mind and didn't step back in. This is why arguments rarely cause endings. They reveal endings that were already forming. A strong bond survives conflict. A weakening bond interprets conflict as confirmation. And here's the most important understanding. You cannot detect this process by watching behavior alone. It lives in interpretation first. The same actions can mean connection or disconnection, depending on what the mind has decided they represent. That's why some partners feel completely blindsided. They were participating in shared moments, while the other person was privately reinterpreting those same moments as proof of distance. By the time the relationship officially ends, two different realities have existed for months. One person experiencing the relationship as ongoing, the other experiencing it as gradually finished. So, the lesson isn't paranoia or suspicion. It's awareness. Relationships don't end when affection disappears. They end when the story about the relationship changes inside someone's mind and stays unchallenged long enough to feel permanent. If you remember anything from this, remember this. People don't leave the moment they disconnect. They leave the moment they convince themselves the disconnection is meaningful. And once the mind accepts that story, actions simply follow. So pay attention not just to what is happening between two people, but to how those moments are being interpreted. Because the real beginning of the end isn't distance, conflict, or even loss of feeling. It's the quiet moment when someone stops seeing the relationship as something to repair and starts seeing it as something to explain. That's where every ending I've ever studied truly begins. And by the time you hear the explanation, the decision has already been lived many times in silence.